penetrated by bamboo, broken on a wheel, and tied up in unnatural positions.
Oh, that's hot. That's hot.
That and many other gross punishments. Yeah, we're going through them today. Hi and welcome to Morbid History. I'm Pilvi, and boy do we have some gross, horrifying, and straight out weird ways to be tortured, punished, or executed through our dark past. Without further ado, let's get straight on into it. Yay!
Every job must be carefully analyzed.
Asia, bamboo. One of nature's own marvels. Strong, grows, hecking fast. Up to 90 centimeters in only 24 hours. Ja, yes, the wonders of nature. But this is not a nature channel. This is a jauntily macabre channel. So now we're just sitting here, asking ourselves, okay, cool, bamboo is cool. Pandas love bamboo and we love pandas. But the dark history of bamboo is coming straight at you now. The quality of the bamboo being able to grow very, very fast, around 4 centimeters in an hour, inspired some sadistic nutcase one day, and the bamboo torture was well and truly thrown into the world. What it consisted of would differ. Sometimes you tied a Sometimes you would tie a person in a sitting position over a baby bamboo shoot, which is spiky and very, very hard. And you would, of course, tie them with their rear over the shoot. You could imagine the immense pain that would cause over just a few hours as the bamboo would grow vertically up through the anus into the body. In other cases, people would just be tied onto a little wooden construction over a large amount of baby bamboo shoots, and they would also quickly grow and penetrate the unfortunate body lying there. Sometimes this was used as punishment, sometimes as execution. I mean, you would probably get cancelled within a day. But sometimes it was used as torture to gain information. I mean, once you really started feeling that thing getting into your private parts, you would have been a hecking strong man to resist spilling all thy beans. And I just say, I'd rather not. I'd rather not at all. And with that, let's move into something similar. Next one. Our next entry we can thank the Spanish Inquisition for. You know, those diabolical bastards. They just really liked tormenting and being shitheads, asshats. They devised a kind of chair. I'm using the word chair extremely lightly. It was a wooden or steel metal triangle, pointy upwards and with 4 legs. The Judas cradle. On top of it, the condemned person would be hoisted with some apparatus of ropes, and if they were a man, the pointy bit was placed over, like, into the rectum, and if you were a female, it went into the vajayjay, your hoo-ha. Gravity would usually do its job. If that didn't happen fast enough, the gravity wasn't doing its job, they would put weights on the condemned, or the people in charge could, like, pull a pulley which made the ropes that the condemned was fastened to, well, they would hoist them up and down at different speeds, and yeah, all to the executioner's leisure. The point of the Judas cradle was, of course, a slow demise, and that would happen through sepsis, infection, blood loss, or just the trauma to the body when the pointy tip moved further and further into the body. Thank you, Spanish Inquisition, for that one. But let's move on from things getting hoisted into your lower bodily openings now. It's dangerous to go alone. Please, take this. Also, take a moment to pat the like button, hit subscribe, and yeah, boost the algorithm. I promise, it doesn't hurt. And now we go to those lovely medieval dungeons that we hear so much nice things about. And being locked up in a cold, damp, dirty dungeon would be quite shitty enough. But what about being thrown into a dungeon within a dungeon, which is basically just a very uncomfortable hole deep into the ground? That's called the oubliette, which is from the French word to forget. You were supposed to be put down there and forgotten. So a form of punishment, torture, and psychological horror. The place down there would be so cramped that you couldn't stand properly, you couldn't sit, you couldn't squat, you couldn't lie, you couldn't kneel, you couldn't do anything really. You were just like forced to stand in an unnatural position day in and day out. Usually you would starve within a few days. Sometimes you would survive for a little bit because the guards could just, for the heck of it, throw down some scraps if they felt like it. Or if they were feeling mischievous, they could throw down some manure on you. And excrement and urine. Whee! Also, water would be pooling and dripping down there, so it wasn't a very pleasant place to be. It was damp, cold, and you had rats biting at you. If you were lucky, you would be standing on top of the dearly departed victims of yesterdays, to put it nicely. Because if not, they could also give you a spiky floor. So you had to stand on spikes to make everything extra fun. Yep, you would be gnawed by rats, you would be standing on corpses, you would starve, you would feel alone, you would feel claustrophobic. Down there, forgotten to the world. That makes like a nice open dungeon sound pretty dang neat. No happy endings there. This next one is a real treat. And probably the worst one in my opinion. Ancient Persians were clever. They didn't have lots to do, I guess, when they came up with these weird things. Either way, we're talking about the boats or scaphism, but I'm gonna say the boats because that's just easier for my Swedish dum-dum brain. It all started with the condemned being placed inside of a boat in still waters. Then they would place another boat on top of it, but it was cut as thus, so the head and limbs were sticking out. Yes, far enough so good, going on a little boat trip in some water. Usually in a very open place, so the sun would be shining very, very hot on you. Swampy territories felt like the way to go there, yeah, and then you would be force-fed milk and honey, like really not in a good way. Like, yeah, that sounds yummy, but force-fed. You would get bloated and would feel gross, not good. And they would also smear milk and honey all over you. Why? Well, to attract bugs and other things that enjoy stuff like that. They would come there and swarm you and bite all over you and your yummy yummy milk and honey body, which would after a while be 90% of your body makeup. Because this would usually take days, weeks before you finally were released into dearly departure. Someone would come every day to make sure to force feed you that milk and honey and throw some of it on you. That in itself would cause you to be a bit... It would come out in a bad way on the other side. So inside of the boat you would be...
floating around in your own sugary sweet filth.
But at the end of it, you would succumb to either gangrene, sepsis, or just being eaten alive by bugs. Those Persians had a head on them. Yes. After all that, some water drops might not sound that terrible. But now we're talking about Chinese water torture. It consisted of a person being tied down and a bucket placed over their head. From that, drops would slowly drop to the forehead. Water dropping constantly on your forehead. Fun? No. Cause for panic? Yeah. But this was psychological torture at its finest. Because it was made sure that the droplets would be irregular, you were pretty much stuck there for hours, days on end, just watching, not knowing when the last or the next drop would come. After a while, each drop would feel like a hammer to your skull. And this in turn would cause you to have a psychotic break. To make it all stop, you would probably just spill all those beans that your captors were waiting for. It sounds like such a silly thing, but I can imagine it being traumatizing after a few days or hours. Moving on. Pirates. Everyone loves a good pirate. Until you get on their bad side. Keelhauling. Keelhauling was a neat little form of torture and punishment that made use of the very ship that they were on. Crafty. The punished person, the condemned, would be tied to a rope and then whisked down into the water and dragged along the bottom or the keel of the ship, up and down again, and up and down and up and down. How many times you did that was dependent on the crime you committed, whilst being dragged against the bottom of said boat. you would come upon some beautiful natural flora which flourished down there, barnacles and the like. And they would slice and dice your poor body. Also, just hitting against the ship a few times over and over would cause traumatic injuries, often to the head. The point wasn't always to demise a person, but it couldn't be helped, really, if that happened, because it's quite a terrible thing for one's body to go through. Thanks, pirates, for that one. To think that most of these execution methods were out in the open, usually, for people to spectate and watch, and yeah. It's funny that people today say that we see too much violence. History. I love it. Now back to Asia, and a practice called death by 1,000 cuts, or lingchi. This is actually a practice that they just kept going back at it for almost thousands of years. There's actually a modern video of the last time I think this happened, and you can find it on Google. I'm not gonna show it, but yeah, you look that up if that's your cup of tea. But we're gonna just go through what the heck that entailed. The condemned person, usually a traitor or something like really big, terrible like that, would be tied up to a pole. The executioner would go at it, and there would be lots of people watching. This was a public spectacle. The person was really, they wanted them to be shamed thoroughly. Anyway, the executioner would go about cutting small slices of flesh, one by one by one. This could take hours to days, depending on how ruthless the slicer was or how terrible the crime was. There's accounts of families actually even bribing the executioner for a quick cancellation of the condemned's life subscription, and the executioner would like cut them strategically, like throat or something like that, to make the demise happen faster, of course. But if they didn't, it could take very long. Just think, like having someone slicing pieces of you randomly here and there until you finally succumb. One of the main reasons why this was a popular way to execute, there was and has always been in many parts this thought that you have to be whole, your body has to be whole to be able to enter into the next life. And if someone was cutting your body apart, piece by piece, you wouldn't be very whole at the end of it. As a punishment and torture and execution, it's a good idea as any. You have the public shaming, you have the torture, you have the not coming into the afterlife in one piece. I guess that's why they just kept keeping on with the lingchi. On to the next entry. The breaking wheel. Perishing people through means of a wooden wheel was very popular through history. What did they do with this sturdy wooden apparatus? Many things. Whatever their deprived little minds could muster up. Why not just drop it over and over on someone until they were broken? Tie the victim on the wheel and twirl it around over an open flame, burning them slowly. Or the most popular one, tying a person to a breaking wheel and hitting them with iron rods over and over until all their bones were broken and then tying them to a different wheel in unnatural positions, because that was easy when everything was broken, and hoisting that up on a large pole for everyone to gawk at until you demised up there, and even afterwards, as a warning. Sometimes they would use all of these tricks on one person, if they deemed it necessary. Our past was pretty morbid, but it's interesting nonetheless. And now to one that most people have probably already heard about: hanged, drawn, and quartered. This penalty was used in England for treason. It's always treason. Yep, it was a long and complicated spectacle. Like, really, they really wanted people to see this, take it in, and feel like, dang, I won't do any treason, ma'am. Or man, sir, lord, king, queen, whoever. Well, if the king decided that you were someone who did some treason, what would happen? Well, let's get into it. First, you would be dragged by a horse, drawn to your gallows. In the beginning, you actually were drawn against the coarse natural ground, which would mean that you would arrive at the place of punishment already quite demised, or very much unconscious, which defeated the entire purpose. So later on, they had you drawn on a wooden plank. So you were still drawn by the horse, but they made sure that you would arrive at the gallows whole. And then they would take you up to the gallows to be hanged, but not until the early departure. You were just supposed to be strangled until you lost some consciousness, but you were still alive. So it wasn't the usual hanging where the drop broke the neck. Instead, you would be just left dangling a little until they found it good enough and they took you down. Sometimes before taking you down, they would disembowel you there too, for good measure, like dragging out your innards in front of the crowd that were like, yay, wow, God, what fun we're having. Ooh. But yeah, once they were done with that, the quartering would commence, and that would also happen in different ways. Sometimes you would just be emasculated and your head chopped off like that, and your body quartered. And sometimes they would let the horses come back and do the quartering by tying the person to 4 horses by their limbs, and you can guess the horses were forced to run in different directions, and you would be quartered. What a nice word to say it! Just being quartered by horses was a punishment by its own, even without all the other things. To be hanged, drawn, and quartered was a whole spectacle, and people loved to see it. Yeah, don't we love that for them? Some entertainment. Oh, those silly traders! Why can't they just stop trading? Truly some good old-timey medieval entertainment, if there ever was any.
In today's news, it's a sunny fine day here in ye old England. The traitor Lord Wafflebum will be sure to bring lots of rejoicement and cheers during today's execution. Our loving regent has chosen horses for the quartering for this special day. What a treat.
Now moving on to an extra entry. It's a very gross one, but it's from my little birth country. I'm Finnish, but I'm born here in Sweden, and it's a gross one, so let's get into that before we end our fun little gross video. As our last entry, we have something called the Swedish drink. And seriously, I just heard of this not long ago. I didn't even know it existed. But I'm gonna tell you all about it, and it's not a fun thing to have happen to you. Let's get into it. Ending it with a high note. The Swedish drink was a torture method used by the Swedish military during the 30-year war. I'm bad at numbers, I'm gonna have to read it, but it ranged between 1618 and 1648. It was a war, and many people perished. And many people were subjected to this concoction. If the Swedish military wanted to get information where the townspeople had hid some rations, food or valuables, money, anything really, they would take some of them and forcefully pour the Swedish drink down their throats. And what was it? Yeah. It could be liquid manure. It could be human excrement, urine. Yeah, a mix of everything gross that you could find, and it was a lot of it. It would cause the stomach of the person to bloat massively. Terrifying. And when that happened, they would walk on the stomach. They would press it down, like placing a wooden plank on it and press. They would sometimes even poke at it with sharp spears. Yeah. And they continued doing this until the poor person subjected to it finally cracked and told them whatever the Swedes wanted to know. Well, I can't take accountability for this because I've done my genealogy and I'm a Finn. According to my family tree, we were Finnish farmers from Finnish northern Lapland, where Santa lives, way back into the 1600s. So I had nothing to do with that. Just so you know, just to be clear. And that's a wrap. Thank you so much for watching. Which one of these entries do you think would be the worst one to go through? I think it's the boat thing. Thank you so much for watching, and a giant thanks to my lovely Patreons. I hope you enjoyed the latest exclusive I released there. I will be making more very soon, so stay tuned over there. You're my heroes, my lovely patrons, and you're my heroes too, for just being here, supporting and watching. And with that, stay amazing, stay hydrated, but most of all, stay morbid, and I'll see you very, very soon. Bye bye!